I think I speak for most gamers when I say we just want everyone to shut up about the Activision Microsoft thing. Like, it's just the same thing over and over again at this point. Microsoft says they want to buy Activision, Sony freaks out and whines about it, Microsoft says something that counters the thing Sony was whining about, then Sony whines about something else, and the cycle just repeats like that over and over again. It's so tiresome. But there are two other things that have remained constant throughout all of this, those being Sony's total hypocrisy when it comes to paid third-party content, and the PlayStation community's eagerness to look the other way regarding it. On April 25th, a tweet from Peter Ovo started going a bit viral. According to statements made during the Microsoft Activision hearings, it was alleged that Sony had made a deal with Square Enix to completely stop working with Xbox and Microsoft in any capacity. And you can meme on Square Enix all you want, they're still one of the biggest publishers in the industry, so this is a big deal if true. It also wouldn't be out of character for Sony to do something like this considering how much third-party exclusivity they've already paid for, including with Activision, ironically. The reason this is important is because for like a year now, Sony has been whining about how Microsoft shouldn't be able to buy Activision, despite statements from Microsoft that they want to keep their biggest properties like Call of Duty on the PlayStation. There's even that 10-year Call of Duty deal that Sony keeps rejecting because they just have to be the victim no matter what, even if it ends up hurting their business and bringing about the thing they say they don't want. Sony has had every opportunity to get what they want, and yet they've raised a big stink about the purchase being anti-consumer or dangerous for the industry, despite them being complete hypocrites doing the exact same thing. A few years ago, Sony bought Bungie, the makers of one of the most popular games in the world. They've also gone out of their way to make sure characters like Spider-Man and Wolverine, who they had no hand in creating, don't get their standalone games released on the Xbox. And that's not even mentioning that Square Enix titles like Forspoken and Final Fantasy XVI are not being released on the Xbox for really no reason. And how many years has Sony had that deal with Activision for PlayStation exclusive perks and Call of Duty? Like, Sony plays dirty, and if we all just acknowledge that, we could all move on. But if these reports about Sony paying for Square Enix exclusivity end up being true, that's going to be a really bad look for them. Now, I should point out before I get started that these allegations are not 100% confirmed to be true, but this video isn't about whether or not the statement is true. This video is about the PlayStation fanboys who read this news and immediately jumped to the defense of Sony. Because whether or not Sony paid Square Enix for exclusivity isn't really funny, but Sony fanboys being total hypocrites? That is funny. You guys cried and moaned for months on end that Microsoft was just buying up the competition and refusing to play fair. And yet when Sony is accused of doing the exact same thing, you lose your minds and immediately try to defend them. It's honestly getting embarrassing to say I share a hobby with you people. The third party agrees to the deal and receives something in return. That means Square, separate of Sony, is entering the deal to benefit itself. It truly boggles the mind how dumb this argument is. Yes, because Activision would allow itself to be bought by Microsoft if it didn't want to be bought by Microsoft. Contrary to popular belief, Activision is in favor of being bought by Microsoft. That's why they're allowing it. You can't just decide to buy a company if they don't want to be bought. And this is all completely besides the point that the original tweet is making, which is that Sony are complete hypocrites for opposing Microsoft's acquisition of Activision when they themselves engage in paid third-party exclusivity on a pretty regular basis. You don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but it can't be okay when one side does it and bad when the other does it. That's ridiculous. Sony helped fund some of their biggest games. You know nothing, lol. So third-party exclusivity is okay when the console manufacturer helps fund the game. So the Activision and Bethesda acquisitions are fine, right? You fucking airhead. Aw, Microsoft wants to take COD away from 71% of the player base, but you change the goalpost to complain about Square Enix, where again, 70% of the player base is on PlayStation. Yeah, nice try, Jim. We all know this is your alt account. Look, Microsoft literally isn't taking Call of Duty away from PlayStation. And if Call of Duty stops coming to PlayStation, you only have Sony to blame, not Microsoft. Ironically. You have poor grammar skills. It's signed, not signed. Are you serious? You're a disgrace to humanity. Stop your bile now.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
Xbox fanboys calling out Sony when Microsoft do the same damn thing. Grow the heck up and stop crying. Morty, that's the point. Sony is acting like this stuff isn't happening and using that as justification for the Activision purchase to be blocked, even though they're guilty of the exact same thing. Paid third-party exclusivity can't only be a bad thing when Microsoft does it. I think it's fucking stupid no matter who's doing it, but I'm always happy to laugh at the people who somehow think only Sony should be allowed to do this. Xbox don't deserve good games. Keep your ugly exclusives like Starfail and Redfail that Microsoft stole by buying a third-party publisher. So anti-consumerism is okay as long as you don't like the games. So next time Microsoft wants to launch a game, just be sure to remind them to run it by you first. Just to show everyone how disingenuous Peter Ovo and Xbox are, this is what Peter is sourcing. You'll notice that Xbox is saying that Bloodborne, a PlayStation-owned IP, is being blocked from Xbox. Like, come on, man, this is embarrassing. If Bloodborne isn't being blocked from Xbox, why isn't it there? Can you guys hear the rain on my window? Holy shit. There's a storm brewing. But yeah, the IP is owned by Sony, but the game was developed by From Software, who have released every single other Soulsborne game on every platform. Are you really going to tell me with a straight face that FromSoft wouldn't want Bloodborne on other platforms? And if Sony wasn't keeping Bloodborne from going to the Xbox, why isn't Bloodborne on the Xbox? It's the same document where Microsoft says Sony excluded Xbox to release Bloodborne. You bots are just corporate shill clowns, LMAO. But, oh my god. Sony approached FromSoft, a multi-platform third-party company, to make a game on the grounds that they kept it off the Xbox. Sony kept a third-party game from the Xbox. Just because you say it in a shitty tone of voice doesn't mean it's not true. The way Sony kept Bloodborne from the Xbox is the same way that Microsoft kept Sunset Overdrive from the PlayStation. The console manufacturer struck up a deal with a third-party developer to make a game that would not go to the opposing console. This is not hard to understand, and it is not pro-consumer in the slightest. You're trying to act like there's some technicality to be like, oh, Sony and Bloodborne, that's different. Bloodborne wasn't kept from the Xbox. Well, Sony doesn't own FromSoft, so why isn't Bloodborne on the Xbox? Oh yeah, because Sony made sure it didn't happen. Again, do you really think From Software doesn't want more people playing one of their best games? Do you really think that's the position of FromSoft? Or do you think that's the position of Sony? The irony of you Xbox fanboys is insane. Buying many third publishers is okay, but doing some third-party exclusivity deals is not done. Clown. Last of Us profile picture, opinion discarded. Who cares? I knew Sony was the more competitive gaming company, so I switched to PS4 after the 360. Y'all just salty and don't want to switch. Had the game, not the player. I think you meant hate the player, but you know, it's Twitter. Also, attempting to block third-party exclusivity while engaging in third-party exclusivity is not competitive. It's literally the opposite. It's Sony trying to take advantage of lawmakers and regulators who don't know anything about video games so they can eliminate potential future competition. It's shady as fuck, and it benefits nobody in the industry except Sony. Like, it doesn't benefit you, the gamer. It literally only benefits Sony, no one else. That's not competition, it's anti-competitive by definition. All the more reason to stop being poor console warriors and buy a PlayStation and or Xbox and actually play all the games you cap for. Shouldn't this actually be an indication to switch to the PC? You know, the platform with all of the games? And the platform that isn't owned by a bunch of greedy suits just trying to bend the rules to their advantage? Translation: Sony signed marketing and exclusive deals with third-party developers, in some cases providing development support, industry standards since 1980, same as Xbox and Nintendo, but yeah, let's try spins as corruption. Corruption is not the argument. Hypocrisy is. Good, Sony is saving gaming. Monopolies are good, we love monopolies, yay! At Xbox P3, please never bring any first-party studio game to PlayStation. Spyro, Crash, COD, etc. Nothing, please. Wait, but Spyro and Crash started as PlayStation exclusives. The only reason you as an Xbox player are able to play those games is because they broke out of their exclusivity, and now you want the exclusivity to come back? Are you made of fucking Jamba Juice? Like, what is this? Look, I've said it a million times, and I'll say it a million more times. Sony and Microsoft both engage in third-party exclusivity. In fact, all the stupid third-party exclusivity is one of the reasons I switched to the PC. It's also meaningless and petty and exhausting. Sony constantly lies about what they're doing behind the scenes, and Microsoft striking up third-party deals is no different from what Sony does. So why is the Activision acquisition such a massive shit show? What purpose did it serve? Especially since by the time this video goes up, the deal may have already been approved. Like, neither of these companies are your friends, so stop simping for them. They're not gonna fuck you. At least not in the way that you want. Toodles.